Hi guys, we were talking on Sukkot and a little bit in class yesterday about some of the issues relating to historical context. I had wanted ideally to touch on three things in class. I see we didn't get through all of them, so I'm going to review the first two things quickly that we mentioned in class and then focus on the third thing I wanted to mention. First thing we brought up was to talk about polemical arguments. The word polemical literally just means controversial. If you look in a dictionary over here, a polemic is a controversial argument against a specific, opinion or doctrine. But in the context in which we're using it, when we talk about certain arguments being specifically polemical arguments, what we're really saying is these are arguments that were argued in the context of a controversy, which raises the question, did the author say things in the midst of a controversy that maybe he himself didn't believe? And I brought this up because most of you correctly identified the fact that, in general, the fact that people have a particular historical context in which they live is a good thing. And if anything, it enables us, living centuries later, to be the beneficiary of a range of different interpretations, because in each time and place, sort of a fresh set of eyes with a fresh perspective on things comes to look at the same issues. And maybe, a Jew living in Eastern Europe in the early modern period or in Renaissance Italy can notice something that people in the Middle Ages didn't notice, while there may be other things that they noticed in the Middle Ages that we wouldn't have noticed on our own today, and we're able to glean insights from all these different perspectives. So in general, the fact that different people have different contexts only serves to enhance their ability to better interpret those primary texts that we see as containing timeless truth. But could there be cases where someone actually said things that maybe they themselves didn't think represent that timeless truth because of a particular issue that came up in their time? So we saw an example of this with Rav Saadia Gaon. Let's get that file open over here. Right, this was in your handout, where both Rav Hai Gaon over here said, and subsequently the Rambam on page 2 of the handout, both of them said in their own way that Saadia's view about Yom Tov Sheni was something which Saadia himself knew was wrong. Saadia had said, we're told over here, Rabbeinu Saadia Zal Amar Beferusho, he ein safek meikar. He said there was no doubt originally about which day Yom Tov should be. So why do we keep 2 days of Yom Tov in Chutz La'aretz? Ela Kadosh Baruch Hu Tzivat Moshe Avda, v'hu Amar L'Yisrael ki ba'aretz yeh lahem yom echad, v'chutz La'aretz shnei yamim. Rather, God simply commanded Moshe originally, the way Yom Tov works is that it's 1 day in Israel and 2 days in Chutz La'aretz. Now this is very, v'chein hayamei olam, this is how it always was. This is very controversial because if you read the Gemara Masechet Beitza seems to say the opposite. It seems to say that originally Yom Tov was 1 day everywhere, and they would notify Jews in Chutz La'aretz through the system of bonfires regarding when the new month, the new Rosh Chodesh was declared every month. And then, based on that, even Jews in, let's say, Babylonia, if they found out which day the new Rosh Chodesh was, they'd keep 1 day of Yom Tov. And then, when that bonfire system didn't work, because certain other sectarian Jews who were enemies of the rabbis would dafka light bonfires on the wrong night to throw everybody off, and so they used a new system where they'd send out actual runners to deliver the message of when Rosh Chodesh was, and those runners couldn't get to faraway diaspora communities fast enough to tell them, and so some day would come along that would either be the 14th or 15th of Nisan, and the Jews in Bavel wouldn't know which one it is. And so maybe it's the 15th of Nisan, but maybe it's the 14th, and tomorrow is the 15th of Nisan, and so it began. They'd keep 2 days of Pesach, 2 days of Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah for sure, right? Rosh Hashanah, you have to, Rosh Hashanah even in Israel is an issue because you'd have to find out that same day if it's declared Rosh Hashanah or not. And so, the practice in Israel today is that Jews, even in Israel, keep 2 days of Rosh Hashanah. So a simple understanding of this of Yom Tov Sheni is that it arose from this issue of doubt, of lack of knowledge. Saadia says the opposite, that it always was this way, that we kept 2 days of Yom Tov and Chutz La'aretz. That seems to be against the way the Gemara presents the history of things. And so both Hai Gaon, over here, he says about Saadia, Kanehu Shadachar Apikoros. It was a reed, flimsy reed, meaning something not that strong. He needed this flimsy reed to hit the heretics with. Anything he had that he could hit the Karaites with, that's who the heretics here are, Karaites who deny Torah Shebaal Peh, Saadia was looking to do anything to respond to their attacks on Torah Shebaal Peh, and they considered Yom Tov Sheni to be a very embarrassing subject for rabbinic Jews, because they said, it shows you how pathetic your system is. You're keeping 2 days, so you don't know which day is the right day. Meanwhile, you know that once upon a time, really, you do know what the right day is now, supposedly, because today you claim you have a fixed calendar, which the Karaites didn't accept. The Karaites still, each month, see when the new moon is. So the Karaites said, you rabbis, you're all messed up. You admit that you changed the system from new moon sightings every month to a fixed calendar. So that itself shows like rabbis just make stuff up as they go and are always changing the rules. And then even though you say your calendar that you made up is such a reliable calendar that you always know the right dates now, and yet you still keep 2 days of Yom Tov, doesn't make any sense. And so Sadia said, no, we keep 2 days of Yom Tov because we always did. Sadia actually went further than this. It's not in the quote from Hai over here. Sadia said that there always was a fixed calendar, and so he basically told the Karaites back that the rabbis didn't change the calendar system. It was always a fixed calendar based on astronomical calculations, not based on witnesses. And moreover, said Sadia, therefore, why did they need Yom Tov Sheni if everything was always based on fixed calculations? Couldn't they just check their calendar in Babylonia? Well, they could, but there was a tradition going back to Moshe that we keep 2 days of Yom Tov. So Hai Gaon characterized that as a flimsy reed that Sadia Gaon needed to hit that Bikursim with. Rambam similarly writes about Sadia Gaon, Eni choshev she'omar ken mamin b'kach. I don't think this person who said this, meaning Sadia, believed it. Rather, his purpose with this was to gore his enemy, to attack his enemy, whatever way possible, unfairly or fairly. He had to say something back. Since Sadia could not find any escape, miflat means escape, like a palid is a refugee. Sadia could not find any way to escape like a refugee to get out from the pressure of the argument. He was caught in an argument with Karaites. Sadia Gaon was basically the most prominent Torah scholar of his generation, and he lived in this Jews and Muslims land. In those communities, there were major Karaite communities as well. So he's got these Karaites living in the same places where his rabbinite followers live. They need a simple response to Karaite attacks, until he came up with a simple response, which he himself knew was wrong. Now that argument can potentially be very dangerous, right? The minute you start saying authors don't really believe what they say, where does that leave us? And so, that in this case, I think Rambam and Hai Gaon felt they had to say this about Sadia, because the alternative is to basically say that Sadia Gaon was an Amharic. The alternative to say it said Sadia Gaon didn't know what it said in the Gemara, didn't know even stories in the Mishnayot that deal with situations where Yom Kippur fell out on a Friday or a Sunday, which can't happen in our calendar. So obviously there was a different system in place back then. And so Rambam and Hai felt that there's no way that any reasonable person who read the Talmud and believed in the Talmud could possibly say what Sadia said over here. And so it must be that he only said it for polemical reasons in order to try and win this argument against the Karaites in the court of public opinion. So the average guy who might have a hard time with a sophisticated argument about how Torah Shebaal Peh evolves sometimes, and that's why we have a new calendar system, that person could be won over with a simple argument if the big rabbi, Rabbi Sadia Gaon, said that Yom Tov Sheni is a tradition going back to Moshe. That would put the common guy's mind at ease, and he'd accept that, okay, as a rabbinite Jew, I keep Yom Tov Sheni. And so that's why they felt they had to say it about Sadia in this case. But there is a danger there if you claim that too often about commentators, that they're just saying what they're saying in response to a controversy in their time. You can dilute the value of their comments. In some ways, you might also be challenging their integrity. I think today we're especially sensitive to this. Rambam and Hai didn't feel like they were challenging Sadia's integrity. On the contrary, they felt they were giving an explanation for how it could be that someone like Sadia was a great Talmud Chacham and yet said something so apparently problematic. But today, because knowledge is very much out there, we're very much, we tend to be very wary of an approach in which a scholar will say something which he knows isn't true, but he's only saying it for the common man. It's still true to some degree that sometimes as a rabbi or a scholar, you're forced to let's say, simplify things and present them more simplistically because the audience you're speaking to doesn't have the background to understand every technical detail of complexity. But I think there's a difference between simplifying something and presenting something which you think might not be true at all. And so, I think it's rare that you find cases that you look at where a Gaon or a Rishon will say something where we'd say, he really didn't believe what he said. But if you want to know how it can be that someone's historical context could really sort of be at odds with a timeless tradition, that's where it comes up. When people get sucked into arguments that are such major arguments in their time and place, they feel they have to say anything in order to protect the bigger picture. They have to say anything in order to protect rabbinic Judaism. That's where you start to worry if maybe, like Sadia, they had to say things that they themselves were unsure of, or maybe even didn't believe. I'll just mention one last point on this, which is there are those, I mentioned in class of Menachem Mendel Kasher, the editor of the Torah Shlema, he actually has tried to defend Saadia Gaon's argument on its merits. And as he challenges what Rambam and Hai Gaon said, that Saadia himself knew this was false, he says, he thinks that actually it's possible that Saadia did believe what he said. He tries to show how certain of the Gemara that seem to explicitly contradict Saadia could possibly be reinterpreted in ways that would fit with Saadia Gaon's perspective. So it's not 100% clear that what Hai Gaon and Rambam alleged against Saadia Gaon, that he didn't believe what he said, is true. But, Hai Gaon and Rambam are both, towering figures in their own right, and they did both make this accusation against Saadia Gaon. I then mentioned in class that when it comes to halachic matters, this can be particularly pressing. When it comes to halachic matters, so there's a particular acute concern that someone might say, maybe, we can cast aspersions on the halachic system if the people who are issuing their halachic rulings are doing it based on historical considerations in their time and place rather than eternal truths. The example I gave over here is the Rambam, who did not have so much direct interaction with Christians because he lived, in the Muslim world, grew up in Spain, later lived in Egypt, and Spain at that time was a Muslim country. Egypt still is a Muslim country. So Rambam says, this Christian people, that people that stands with certain claims about the Messiah, meaning they believe in Jesus, al chiluf kitoteh, regarding all its different denominations, kulam ovdei avodah zarah. They all worship avodah zarah. It's not clear how to translate avodah zarah here. I'll just go with foreign worship, because depending what his issue is, if his issue is that they believe in something called the Trinity, the Father, Son, and the Holy Ghost, that's not idolatry. It doesn't involve any idols, but it could be considered polytheism. Others have suggested that what bothers the Rambam about Christianity is the fact that the Christians he knew that existed in his time, this is before Protestantism, they had actual icons in their church that he thought was actual idolatry. Whatever his reason, there's a question if what he says here would apply, even according to Rambam, to various denominations of Christianity that were founded after that, thanks to the Protestant Reformation. But he argues that various Christian beliefs in his time make them Ovdei Avodah Zarah. If that's really true that they're Ovdei Avodah Zarah, then you can't do business with them on their holidays, which would be every Sunday. And Tosfot, who lived among Christians, were aware of the fact this would cripple their whole economy, and basically no one observed that in their time and place. So Tosfot says, Kasha al masam olam biyom ida. How is it that in our time and place people do business with these Ovdei Avodah Zarah, these Christians on their holidays, on Sunday, on Christmas? And Tosfot gives a bunch of reasons why it should be permitted. Either because of Eva, that means certain prohibitions. This prohibition to do business with them is the Isur D'Rabbanan. Sometimes the Isur D'Rabbanan will be waived because we're concerned that creating hostility between us and our neighbors will lead to persecution. Maybe that's not a good reason. So they challenge that over here. I'm not going to get into the details. They say maybe there's a different reason. Maybe because the non-Jews among us, they don't really worship Avodah Zarah, right? Maybe Christianity isn't real Avodah Zarah. Alternatively, Inami, maybe they suggest the distinction between non-Jews you don't know and non-Jews you do know. The non-Jews you know, like your Christian neighbors in medieval Ashkenaz, maybe them you are allowed to do business with. I'm not getting into the details of why. And finally, Rabbeinu Tam argued the whole prohibition only applies to things that they can use in their service. If you sell a Catholic, a wafer on a Sunday morning, he's going to use it for Avodah Zarah. I'll continue this discussion in the next video.